Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Om. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Nice to see you all this morning. Welcome also to all of our students watching online. We begin a new chapter today, chapter 11, Vishwarupa Darshana. I'll give a proper introduction in a few minutes, but most of you already know that it's the most dramatic, powerful chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, and arguably in the entire Mahabharata. We'll discuss all that in a few minutes. We'll begin with some recitation from the beginning of the chapter. As always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Arjno vacha, madgrahaya paramam, madanugrahaya paramam, guhyamadhyatma sanyatam, yatvayoktam vachastena, mohoyam vigato mama, bhavapyayau hi bhutanam, shutau vistarasho maya, tvattah kamalapatraksha, tvattah paraksha, mahatmyamapi cha evam etad tattvam, atmanam parameshwara, drashtumiच्छami te rupam, aishwaram purushottama, manyase yaditachakyam, maya drashtumiti prabho, yogeshwara tato me tvam, darshayatmanam avyayam, Shri Bhagavanu vacha, Pashya me partharupani, Shatashota sahasrashaha, Nana vidhani divyani, Nana Nana varna kritini cha, Nana varna kritini cha, Pashyadityan vasun rudran, Pashyadityan vasun rudran, Ashwinau marutastata, Ashwinau marutastata, Bahunya drishta purvani, Bahunya drishta purvani, Pashyascharayani bharata, Pashyascharayani bharata. Good. We'll see more verses as we go along. So, it's always delightful to start a new chapter, and this chapter in particular, Vishwarupa, the darshana, Arjuna's seeing of the Lord's Vishwarupa, cosmic form. I've mentioned in prior classes that in the Mahabharata, I think I counted 4 or possibly 5, at least 4, I think, Vishwarupas. I can remember 3 of them. One of them occurs here. But earlier, when Sri Krishna was sent to the palace of Dhritarashtra to negotiate and try to avoid the war, Sri Krishna revealed his cosmic form then. And also after the war, there's an odd little story that comes towards the end of the Mahabharata. So those 3 occasions I recall, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more times when Sri Krishna revealed his cosmic form in the story of the Mahabharata. This, of course, is not only the most famous, it's the most elaborate and most powerful dramatic presentation. So we'll enjoy studying it right now. Interesting to see the connection to the prior chapter. We just read the verses and you saw Arjuna is asking, he wants to see more. Back in chapter 10, Sri Krishna already, in fact, in chapter 10, remember Arjuna was asking about Sri Krishna's vibhutis. Vibhuti yoga is the title of the prior chapter, chapter 10. Vibhuti, as you know, means glory. So the chapter, in chapter 10, prior chapter, Sri Krishna reveals or describes his glories. And remember the style of the chapter. It says, among all the rivers, I'm the Ganga. Among the mountains, I'm the Himalayas. Among the objects in the sky, I am the brilliant sun, etc., etc. So he went on to describe that all the glories of the universe are his glories. That is to say that all that exists is a manifestation of his own self. He is manifest in the form of the entire cosmos. This really, in a small capsule, describes the Hindu concept of, or I should say the Vedantic concept of who and what is Ishvara. Hindus, of course, understand Ishvara in many, many ways. But in these teachings of Vedanta, in particular in these teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, we understand Ishvara, the God of the cosmos, not as some individual deity, but rather as the underlying reality because of which everything exists, who then becomes manifest in the form of the cosmos, in the form of the universe. In our last class, we ended the chapter with, I think in English they call it a bombshell. And the bombshell was after Sri Krishna's long narration, elaborate narration of all of his glories, he says, whatever I've told you up to now is just the tiniest fraction of my glories. He has already described the entire universe as being a manifestation of him. And then he said that my manifestation as the glories of the universe is just a small fraction of my glories. Which means whatever glories that exist in the universe are just a small fraction. Arjuna hears this and he says, wow, What's beyond that? He wants to know more. So Sri Krishna says, I've only told you this little bit, leading Arjuna to wonder, what's beyond that? What's beyond the universe? So we can put it like this. Sri Krishna's manifestation as the glories of the cosmos, we could say, is an ordinary revelation. Ordinary in the sense that it's the world around us. The world around us is really not ordinary in any true means. If you really understand what the universe is, it's extraordinary. But it's ordinary in the sense that it's the world. But going beyond the world will lead to something that is truly extraordinary. So if in chapter 10 we see the ordinary glories of Sri Krishna manifest in the form of the world, here in chapter 11 we see an absolutely extraordinary revelation, a special revelation, and we'll see that in just a few minutes. The chapter is in a style which is like story. And many verses won't take much explanation, and I won't elaborate on those verses if they don't need it. I will pause and elaborate when necessary, but we'll be able to move more quickly through these verses since they're mostly stories. So the dramatic, the drama of the chapter is expressed through these, through the telling of the story, and I'll do my best not to interrupt the telling of that story. So with that introduction, we can begin. Arjuna vacha, madanugrahaya paramam, guhyamadhyatma sangyatam, yatvayoktam vachastena, mohoyam vigato mama. Start in the third line. Yat, that which was uktam, told. Yat vachaha, that statement, that teaching, which was uktam, told, tvaya, by you. You have to break the words apart. Tvaya, uktam, tvayoktam. So these teachings, which have been taught by you, Sri Krishna, up one line, these teachings which are guhyam, secret, not, Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna, so it's not secret in the conventional sense, secret in the sense of special. Or as I've said before, you remember me saying, so secret that even telling you, you may not get it. That's how secret these teachings are. And these teachings are adhyatma sangyatam. They are sangyatam, known as being adhyatmam. With regard to atma, the true self, we translate it as spiritual. So these spiritual teachings, which are guhyam, secret, very special. These teachings, back up a line, which are paramam, the ultimate, the highest secret spiritual teachings. These teachings were tvaya uktam, were told why. At the beginning, Arjuna says, mad anugrahaya. Anugrahaya, for the sake of blessing. Mat is the pronoun me. For the sake of blessing me, to bless me, you have told me. All of these teachings, Arjuna is referring to all the teachings that have come, starting right in the second chapter. Notice I didn't say first chapter, because Sri Krishna doesn't start teaching until chapter 11 of the second chapter. Those teachings have been continuing. And as a result of those teachings, Arjuna says, end of the third line, Tena, by those teachings that you have blessed me with, starting in chapter 2, by all these teachings, Last line, mama ayam mohaha, ayam mohaha. This confusion, this delusion, mama, of mine, my delusion is vigataha, has gone away. What confusion is Arjuna referring to? You have to go way back to chapter 1. Remember when Arjuna had that emotional meltdown on the battlefield? He starts shaking, trembling. He can't hold on to his bow. He ends up throwing the bow on the ground, and he sits down on the seat of his chariot because he complains he's too dizzy to stand up. This is Arjuna's emotional meltdown. The symptoms that Arjuna describes sounds very much like a panic attack. And when we studied chapter 1, you might remember me saying that Arjuna, before the battle has even begun, Arjuna has been incapacitated on the battlefield, not by a strike of a weapon. Arjuna has been incapacitated by his own emotions. That's the powerful context of the entire Bhagavad Gita. Spiritual teachings in the context of addressing a very intense emotional problem. And that's the moha, the confusion or delusion that Arjuna is referring to. He's referring to his being overwhelmed by sadness and grief before the battle began. Why was he overwhelmed by sadness and grief? He looked across the battlefield and he saw amongst his enemies Bhishma, Drona, so many other family members and friends that he loved dearly, and Arjuna was already anticipating that they were going to perish on the battlefield. Anticipatory grief, they call that. Arjuna was already grieving even before they died, and overwhelmed by grief. That's his moha that he was overcome by. In this verse, he acknowledges that the teachings up to this point have already removed his grief. So we've already seen, of course, we're already more than halfway through the text. So a lot of powerful teachings came, starting in chapter 2, coming all the way up to this chapter 11. Those teachings were powerful enough to remove Arjuna's confusion and his grief. And he continues, Bhavapyayau hi bhutanam, Bhavapyayau hi bhutanam, Shutau vistarasho maya, Shutau vistarasho maya, Tvattah kamalapatraksha, Tvattah kamalapatraksha, Mahatmyamapi chavyayam, Mahatmyamapi chavyayam. Again, starting a third line. Kamala Patraksha. He addresses Krishna as one whose aksha, one whose eyes are like Kamala Patra, the leaf of a lotus, one who has lotus leaf-like eyes. O Krishna, Tvattaha, from you, back up a line, from you, maya shutam, it has been heard by me. From you I have heard vistarashaha, in detail, referring now to the prior chapter, chapter 10, Vibhuti Yoga. Arjuna is now referring to what he has just heard. From you, O Krishna, I have already heard you teach in chapter, not, Arjuna wouldn't say in chapter 10, because all these chapters came later, not during the dialogue on the battlefield. So I have already heard from you all those teachings. Back up a line. Bhava apyayau hi bhutanam. I've heard the teachings about the bhava, the origin, and apyaya, destruction, the birth and death of bhutanam, of all beings. I've already heard your teachings back in chapter 10, where Sri Krishna said in chapter 10 that he was the origin of all beings and all beings return unto him. Already said. Not only that, but in the last line, Mahatmyam api cha, and also I have heard about your avyayam mahatmyam, your vastness, your glories, avyayam, eternal glories, in everlasting glories. I've already heard all that in chapter 10. Arjuna is building up to his question. You can see what he's doing. So he's acknowledging he's already heard a lot in chapter 10, but that's not enough. Arjuna wants even more, and he leads up to his question. Evam etat yatha tattvam, evam etat yatha tattvam, atmanam parameshvara, atmanam parameshvara, drashtumichhami te rupam, drashtumichhami te rupam, Aishwaram Purushottama, Aishwaram Purushottama. Middle of the first line, yatha, just as, tvam, you, ata, told. Just as you told, etat, this, referring back to chapter 10, all of your glories, evam, thus, just as you already taught me, all of your glories. What glories you taught me? Atmanam, about yourself, your true self, your glories manifest in the world. Parameshvara, O Supreme Lord. He addresses Sri Krishna. Now he begins his question. Drashtum ichhami te rupam aishwaram. But now he's not satisfied with what was already taught. He says now, drashtum ichhami, I want. Drashtum, to see. Te rupam, your form. What kind of form? Aishwaram. I want to see your literally lordly form, but maybe otherworldly might be a word to better describe this. Some glorious form, some otherworldly form, some supreme form, more than has already been taught in chapter 10. And of course, what was taught in chapter 10 was a lot. And here Arjuna once more. So Purushottama, O highest being, O greatest of all beings, O Lord, I want to know your form which transcends what you told me in chapter 10. Now finally, Arjuna concludes his question. Manyase yadi tachakyam, manyase yadi tachakyam, maya drashtumiti prabho, maya drashtumiti prabho, yogeshvara tato me tvam, yogeshvara tato me tvam, darshayatmanam avyayam, darshayatmanam avyayam. Yadi, if manyase, if you think, if you consider that tachakyam, that it is possible, maya drashtum, for your form drashtum to be seen, maya, by me, iti prabho, O Lord, if you think it is possible for me to see that otherworldly, transcendent form, that which is already beyond what was described in chapter 10. Already in chapter 10, all the glories of the cosmos are Ishvara's glories, Sri Krishna's glories. Arjuna wants to go beyond that. He says, if you think it is possible for me to see that, Yogeshvara, O Lord of Yoga, tataha, then may unto me Tvam darshaya, tvam, you, darshaya, show. Show me. Then show me what? Atmanam, yourself. Avyayam, that which is transcendent is the word that comes to me. Avyayam literally means undecaying, everlasting. But Arjuna, maybe he's struggling with words, trying to find words to encourage Krishna to give him more beyond that which was taught in chapter 10. So he says, notice he says, if you think it's possible for me to see your form. Meaning Arjuna has a doubt. How will he see that transcendent reality of Ishvara with these two very human eyes? Arjuna admits the difficulty or even impossibility of seeing that transcendent reality, that which is beyond the world. Our eyes are pretty good at seeing everything in the world. But now we're talking about an otherworldly, extraordinary revelation, which won't be visible to normal human eyes. Arjuna anticipates that, and Sri Krishna recognizes that and deals with it, as we'll see. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Pashya me partha rupani, Pashya me partha rupani, Shatashota sahasrashaha, Shatashota sahasrashaha, Nana vidhani divyani, Nana vidhani divyani, Nana varna kritini cha, Nana varna kritini cha. He says, Partha, O Arjuna, son of Prithu, me rupani, my forms, pashya, see. Now, this pashya literally means see, or look. In Hindi mein dekho, exactly that same sense. So please see, but Sri Krishna has yet to show. He has not yet revealed his cosmic form. We'll see that in several more verses. It hasn't begun yet. What do they say? The show hasn't begun. So then what is he? Why is he saying pashya, see? This is a different. It's not pashya in the literal sense. Just like if you say dekho, bat dekho means pay attention, listen. Or in English, when you say, look here, are they telling you to actually look at something? If somebody in an intense conversation says, look here, they're not telling you to look at something, they're telling you to pay attention. And that's what this pashya means. Oh, Arjuna, pay attention. What do you say? Savdhan se dekho. Okay. So please pay attention, Arjuna, so that you can see, so that you will see me rupani, my forms. Notice plural. Why plural? Shatashaha, hundreds of forms. Sahasrashaha, thousands of forms. Oh, Arjuna, pay attention so that you can see my forms in the hundreds and thousands. Forms which are nana vidhani, forms which are of many different kinds. Forms which are divyani, divine, again, otherworldly, transcendent, beyond what we can experience in this world, extraordinary. Forms which are nana, varna, akritini. They have forms which have nana, many varnas, many colors, and many akriti, many forms. Please see, My forms, which have many, many colors and shapes, will take it. Please see my forms, my divine forms, my extraordinary forms of many colors and shapes. Pashyadityan vasun rudran, Pashyadityan vasun rudran, Ashwinau marutastata, Ashwinau marutastata, Bahunya drishta purvani, Bahunya drishta purvani, Pashyascharyani bharata, Pashyascharyani bharata. Prior verse, he mentioned hundreds and thousands of verses. How do you come up with hundreds and thousands of verses? He shows you. He says, Pashya, Arjuna, Dekho, look here, see? Look at this. Look at the Adityan. Aditya is a category of deity. There were 12 main Aditya deities, others also, but 12 main ones. There were 8 deities known as Vasu, Ashtavasu. There were 11 Rudras. How do you get to hundreds and thousands? Sri Krishna is giving you a breakdown. Please see Ashwinau. There were 2 gods known as Ashwins. And there were Maruts. There were 7 groups of 7, 49 Maruts. So he gives you some numerical details about when he says, please see hundreds and thousands. He's not being metaphorical. He's being literal. Literally, hundreds and thousands of forms. Bahuni in the 3rd line. Many. Many which adrishta purvani, have never been seen before. Adrishta purva, before. Never seen before. Now, of course, we have to qualify that. As we said, Sri Krishna already revealed his cosmic form in the palace before the war began. So what he's referring to is under ordinary circumstances, never seen before. Only under extraordinary circumstances, when Sri Krishna decides to reveal his cosmic form, then and then only can all this be seen. Otherwise, adrishta purvani. All this has never been seen before. He again says pashya, again in the sense of pay attention. He's about to reveal his cosmic form. Pashya, please see. Ashcharyani, all of these wonders. Bharata, O Arjuna, please look now. Please pay attention as I reveal my cosmic form. Remember, we said that Arjuna, to see that cosmic form, to see a form which is otherworldly, beyond the world, transcendent, human eyeballs will not be sufficient. Arjuna himself admitted that when he asked the question, and now Sri Krishna deals with that limitation of Arjuna's power of sight. Sri Krishna says, actually that's the next verse. I'm jumping the gun. That will be explained in one more verse, but here Sri Krishna continues. Ihaikastam jagat kritsnam, Ihaikastam jagat kritsnam, Pashyadya sacharacharam, Pashyadya sacharacharam, Mama dehe gurakesha, Mama dehe gurakesha, Yachanyatrashtumicchasi, Yachanyatrashtumicchasi. Start in the 2nd line. One more time. Pashya, deko. Look here. Adya, now. Right now. Pay attention. Look here and see, back up a line, see what? Jagat kritsnam. The kritsnam, the entire jagat, the entire world, the entire universe. Look here and see the entire universe, sa, chara, and achara. Everything that is moving and immobile, everything animate and inanimate, everything living and non-living. Please see all of that in the entire world, animate and inanimate. Please see it. First word, breaking it apart, iha ekastam. Iha, here. You can imagine Sri Krishna pointing to himself. Please see the entire cosmos, all that is living and non-living. Please see it. Iha, he points to himself. Here, ekastam, in one place. Please see it here in one place. What is that place? Third line, mama dehe. In mama, my, dehe, in my body. Please see all of that here and now, right here in my own body. Gudakesha, O Arjuna. I actually thought about this a little bit before class. Gudakesha is a little odd term of address. I explained it long ago. Gudaka means sleep. Isha, Lord. Gudaka, Isha, Lord of speech. One who is sleep. One who has mastered sleep. One who has conquered sleep. One who doesn't get tired. That's really the sense of it. One who never tires is Gudaka Isha, Lord of sleep. But some translators translate it as Guda, some of you know, can mean thick. Guda Kesha, one who has thick hair. I've seen that in several translations. The one who has thick hair. And on the surface, that sure sounds like a more likely term of address. Arjuna is young and virile, and you see usually in the when he's presented, he's seen with all this dark hair flowing down to his shoulders. So you might think, well, yeah, that sounds right. One who has thick hair, he's young, virile, not losing his hair like many men do in their lifetimes. But actually, I double-checked on the grammar. Guda is an adjective, ends with a short a. Here we have guda, which means it is grammatically impossible to get that meaning of thick hair. Of course, being grammatically impossible doesn't stop translators who don't know Sanskrit properly. And Sanskrit is a complicated language, absolutely, and it's easy to make mistakes like that. You know, Guda, thick, Kesha, hair, Except it's not Guda, it's Guda. So anyway, to properly translate any scripture, including the Bhagavad Gita, really requires quite a bit of skill. Otherwise, it's easy to make errors like that. So, O Arjuna, look here. See now, here in my own body. See the entire universe. Here, now, in my body. And not only that, in the last line, yat cha anyat. And also, anything else, anyat. Anything else, drashtum itchasi, that you want to see. So you can see not only the entire universe, you can see anything else that you want to see, including, and this is a little hint towards later verses. Arjuna might be curious how the war turns out. And it is possible for Arjuna to look into the future during Sri Krishna's Vishwarupa. In fact, Sri Krishna is going to give Arjuna a peek into the future. And that's kind of hinted at, anticipated here. Sri Krishna will show Arjuna what happens in the future during the course of the battle. And so he says to Arjuna, and if you happen to be curious about what will happen in the war, yatcha, anyat, and anything else that you want to see, you can see all of that here within my body. Now, I jumped the gun, as they said. Here in the next verse, Sri Krishna explains the limitations of Arjuna's human eyes being incapable of seeing this transcendent revelation, this otherworldly revelation, and Sri Krishna has a solution for that problem. Natu mam shakyase drashtum, natu mam shakyase drashtum, anenaiva swachakshusha, anenaiva swachakshusha, divyam dadami te chakshuhu, divyam dadami te chakshuhu, pashya me yogam aishwaram, pashya me yogam aishwaram. So, Sri Krishna says too, but, na shakyase, you are not able, mam drashtum, to see me. How? Anena eva swa chakshusha. Chakshus, eyes. Swachakshus, your own eyes. Anena, with these. Swachakshusha, with your own eyes, you are not able to see this otherworldly, transcendent revelation. Those human eyes will not be adequate to see all this. Therefore, in the third line, Sri Krishna says, Dadami, therefore I give, te, unto you, I give you divyam chakshuhu, divine eyes, divine vision, a divine, the ability to see what others cannot see. So Sri Krishna blesses Arjuna with the capacity to see his revelation, this otherworldly revelation. Some of you will remember that there was another example in the context of the Bhagavad Gita of this divya chakshus, this divine sight. Many of you will remember that Sanjaya, remember Sanjaya? Who's narrating all of this to the blind king back in the palace? Sanjaya, that's Sanjaya. Not Sanjaya, your friend. This Sanjaya, the minister of the blind king Dhritarashtra, was blessed by the Rishi Vyasa with divya chakshus, with this divine vision, so that Sanjaya, being back in the palace with Dhritarashtra, Sanjaya could see and hear, witness everything happening on the battlefield, and then describe all that to the blind king Dhritarashtra. So already, Sanjaya has one kind of divya chakshus, divine vision, and now Arjuna too is given this divine chakshus, this divine capacity to see what others cannot see, so that Arjuna can witness this otherworldly revelation. And Sri Krishna concludes, Pashya, see now, and this Pashya is perhaps not idiomatic, not look here. He means quite literally look and see. This Pashya doesn't mean pay attention. This Pashya, because Sri Krishna is at this moment starting to about to reveal his cosmic form. So this Pashya is quite literal. Look and see. Look and see what? Me yogam aishwaram. Me, my aishwaram, power. My yogam, yoga power. Aishwaram, divine. Please see my divine power. Yoga here means power. Please see my divine power. Please see my majestic power. It's a fine translation. So, as I said, all of this is being narrated by, remember how the Bhagavad Gita began with King Dhritarashtra asking Sanjaya what's happening on the battlefield. So it's been a while since we've gone back to the palace. And now the scene shifts from the battlefield back to the palace. Remember the story within a story? So here the innermost story is about Sri Krishna's dialogue with Arjuna. Back out one level, and you have the story of Sanjaya narrating all of this to the blind king Dhritarashtra in the palace, and that's where we shift our attention to right now. Sanjaya uvacha, Sanjaya uvacha, eva muktva tato rajan, eva muktva tato rajan, mahayogeshvaro harihi, mahayogeshvaro harihi, darshayamasa parthaya, darshayamasa parthaya, Paramam Rupamaishwaram, Paramam Rupamaishwaram. So not only does Arjuna have this divine sight, Sanjaya also has this divine sight, which means as Sri Krishna reveals his cosmic form, not only will Arjuna see it, Sanjaya will also see it. No one else will see it. It takes place there and then on the battlefield, but all the other warriors on the battlefield won't know what's going on. To them, they'll just see Sri Krishna and Arjuna still talking, and they go on and on and on and on. They're having this really long dialogue. Remember, they pulled their chariot into the middle of the battlefield. They're actually delaying the beginning of the battle. Everyone is getting impatient. When will they stop talking? All the other battle warriors are feeling irritated, perhaps, certainly anxious to begin the war. So that dialogue goes on and on and on. All the warriors are waiting, and they have no idea what is being said, and they have no idea what is about to happen. And what is about to happen is truly remarkable as Sri Krishna reveals his cosmic form. And not only does Arjuna see it, Sanjaya also sees it, and Sanjaya now relates that to the blind king. He says, Rajan, O king, addressing Dhritarashtra, tataha, then, evam uktva, after saying this. Who is saying this? Harihi, Hari, Lord Vishnu, which is here referring to Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna, who is Mahayogeshvaraha, the great Lord of Yoga. Very strong, poetic language. Strong language, appropriately so, because of what's taking place in this chapter. So Sri Krishna is not referred to as Arjuna's charioteer. He's referred to here as Hari, Narayana, Lord Vishnu. He's referred to as the great, powerful Lord of Yoga. And he says, Evam uktva, having said this much, the prior few verses, then what happened? Darshayamasa. A nice paraphrastic, perfect for our grammar students here, which occur, by the way, just an interesting observation, they occur a lot in the Mahabharata in general, fewer times in the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a stylistic shift in the Bhagavad Gita, something interesting to note. The style of the Bhagavad Gita is a little different than the style of the Mahabharata overall. You see many more of these paraphrastic perfects outside of the Bhagavad Gita. You see just a few inside the Bhagavad Gita. So, Sri Krishna Darsh, am I boring you yet? With all this grammar stuff. Okay, that's enough. So, Sri Krishna Darshayamasa, revealed, partaya, unto Arjuna, son of Prithu is a name for Kunti, son of Kunti. So he showed Arjuna Paramam Rupam Aishwaram. Sri Krishna showed to Arjuna his Rupam, his form, which is Paramam, supreme, and Aishwaram, glorious, majestic. He showed Sri Krishna, he showed Arjuna his divine form, and the Vishwarupa Darshana begins here. So this is where it begins, and this is where Sanjaya now narrates. So not only is Arjuna seeing this, Sanjaya is also seeing this, and Sanjaya describes Aneka Vaktra Nayanam, Aneka Vaktra Nayanam, Anekadbhuta Darshanam, Anekadbhuta Darshanam, Aneka Divya Bharanam, Aneka Divya Bharanam, Divyanekodyatayudham, Divyanekodyatayudham. So, Sanjaya begins now to narrate what he's seeing. First, we're going to get it in Sanjaya's words, and then immediately after, we're going to get it in Arjuna's own words. We'll see that in a few minutes. So first, Sanjaya says, what does Sanjaya see and tell Dhritarashtra? He sees that form, that Vishwarupa, that cosmic form of Sri Krishna, which has Aneka. Now, Aneka literally means not one, but it means countless, infinite. So he sees countless Vaktra, mouths, and Nayana, eyes. So now you can begin to see where the iconography comes. You've all seen pictures of this Vishwarupa that shows this huge form standing on a battlefield with heads going next to each other, many heads on this side, many heads on this side. This is how artists imagine it. They do the best they can. We'll try to visualize it a little more accurately, but it's a good start. If you just imagine countless heads, which have countless mouths, which have countless eyes, Aneka Adbhuta Darshanam, and which have Adbhuta Darshanam, amazing sight. Aneka, countless amazing sights, looking at the Lord's cosmic form. Aneka Divya Abharanam. Abharana is ornaments, like around the wrists and neck and etc. If there are so many heads, all the heads will have earrings, I suppose, and necklaces around the necks. So Sanjaya narrates that all of this has countless divine ornaments. Also, Divya Aneka Udyata Ayudham. You have to break all these words apart. He sees Aneka, countless, Udyata, raised, Ayudha, weapons, which are Divya, divine, otherworldly. So not only are there countless heads, there are countless arms. And in each arm is a weapon, an upraised weapon. So countless arms, each arm holding some kind of weapon upraised. Then, Divya Malyam Baradharam, Divya Malyam Baradharam, Divya Gandhanulepanam, Divya Gandhanulepanam, Sarvascharyamayam Devam, Sarvascharyamayam Devam, Anantam Vishwato Mukham, Anantam Vishwato Mukham. Also, Sanjaya sees Divya Malya Ambara Dharam. So she sees Sri Krishna, who is Dharam, wearing Divya Ambara, divine dress, and Divya Malya, divine malas. So divine, again, meaning otherworldly, things that you cannot see in the world. So all of these forms that Sanjaya witnesses, these forms of Sri Krishna are dressed in otherworldly clothes and wearing otherworldly garlands, not ordinary flowers, but otherworldly flowers. Also, those bodies are divya gandha anulepanam. They are anulepanam, anointed with divya gandha. Gandha here means sandalwood paste. Divya gandha, not ordinary sandalwood paste. Divya gandha, divine, otherworldly sandalwood paste. And he sees all of this. He sees this Devam, this God, which is Sarva Ascharya Mayam, which is an embodiment of all wonders. Sarva Ascharya, this amazing embodiment of all wonders, which is Anantam, limitless. Vishwatomukam. It's a nice place to try to go a little bit beyond those artists' representations. And this is not to be critical of those beautiful paintings. And you see and some very dramatic, some very artistically done, but all are subject to the limitations of what you can put on a canvas, what you can put on a picture. Do you think you could go out with nowadays taking a picture means you go out with your phone and you go click and take a picture. Do you think if you brought a cell phone onto the battlefield, you could take a picture? Nothing would show. This is, by the way, does your cell phone, unless your cell phone is blessed with this divya chakshus, your cell phone is going to be useless in taking a picture of what's happening on the battlefield. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that as hard as these great artists try to capture this splendor and magnificence on some kind of drawing, there's no way to really get there. It's just beyond the imagination. And these last two words really give you that sense. Anantam, limitless. Now the artist will try. So if they're showing many heads, you get the main head in the middle, then slightly smaller ones on the side, slightly smaller. You recognize that kind of picture, right? Notice how the heads keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and if a well-done picture will show them trailing off into infinity. So you have one head in the middle, then smaller, 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 trailing an infinite number of heads trailing off into infinity. And that leads to Anantam, limitless. Also, Vishwato Mukham, the one whose head faces everywhere. And how will you do that? A face which simultaneously facing in all 6 directions, not 4 directions. 4 directions is easy, but also up and down. Faces going in all directions simultaneously. That's a conventional interpretation of the word Vishwatomukam. Here's a more suggestive way of describing it. One whose face is everywhere. That's literally what it means, right? One whose face is everywhere. Consider this. Suppose you imagine Arjuna looking forward and seeing this Vishwarupa. Now suppose Arjuna looks to the left. He sees Vishwarupa. He looks to the right. He says Vishwarupa. He looks behind him. He sees Vishwarupa. He looks above him. He sees Vishwarupa. He looks down. He sees Vishwarupa. That's the sense of this word. How would an artist represent that? What can they do? They do the best they can, but the idea here is it's far beyond anything that can be represented in a picture. Then, and here even Sanjaya recognizes the limitations of description. So now Sanjaya gives a metaphor to try to describe that which cannot be described literally with words. Maybe you can describe it metaphorically. That's what Sanjaya tries here. Divi Surya Sahasrasya, Divi Surya Sahasrasya, Bhaved Yuga Paruttita, Bhaved Yuga Paruttita, Yadi Bhasadrishi Sasyad, Yadi Bhasadrishi Sasyad, Bhasasthasya Mahatmanaha, Bhasasthasya Mahatmanaha. In the third line, Yadi, if. Now go up to the top. If Divi, in the sky, if in the sky Surya Sahasrasya, we count one Surya, but he's now talking about Sahasra, thousands of suns. If there were, on the end of the last line, Uttita, if there was the rising Surya Sahasrasya of 1,000 suns, Yugapat, simultaneously, Bhavet, if that happened, if 1,000 suns were to rise simultaneously, you already know how bright one sun is. So Sanjaya says here, if there were 1,000 suns that were to arise simultaneously, in the third line, Sa Bhaha, that light, Sadrashi Syat, would be like Bhasaha, that would be like the light, Tasya Mahatmanaha, of that great one, of Sri Krishna. Of Sri Krishna, that would be like the light of Sri Krishna. If 1,000 suns were to rise simultaneously in the sky, that would be like the light emanating from Sri Krishna. The light of Sri Krishna would be like the light of 1,000 suns. Very nice poetry. Tatraikastam jagat kritsnam, Tatraikastam jagat kritsnam, Pravibhaktam anekadha, Apashyad deva devasya, Sharire pandavastada. Start at the end of the verse, last line. Very last word, tada, then Pandavaha. Which Pandava? Arjuna. So Pandava here refers to Arjuna. Then Arjuna, what about Arjuna? Back up a line, apashyat, he saw. Then Arjuna saw. What did he see? Where did he see? Sharire, in the body. In whose body? Deva devasya. Notice you have to keep bouncing between those two lines. Then Arjuna saw in the body Deva devasya, of that God of gods. This is Sanjaya's reference to Sri Krishna. Then Arjuna saw in that body of Sri Krishna. What did he see? Go now up to the top. He saw tatra, there, in the body of Sri Krishna, ekastam, in one place. He saw there in that body, gathered together in one place. What was gathered together there? Kritstam jagat. We saw those words before. The entire universe, the entire world gathered there together in one place. Now, gathered there together in one place, you might think it's all like crushed together and indistinguishable. No. He says, pravibhaktam, separately, individually, anekada, in so many ways and forms. Imagine seeing, you can do this in computer artwork. Suppose we were to take 1,000 photographs of 1,000 people and shrink each photograph down into a little tiny head, and then fill the screen with thousands of tiny heads. It's easy to do on a computer, hard for an artist to do that on a canvas, but that's what Sanjaya is narrating here. Imagine seeing everything in the universe with all of its details and distinctiveness. Imagine seeing all of that as though shrunk down and present there within the form of Sri Krishna. We'll see just one more verse. So this is Sanjaya's narration of what Arjuna is. Well, actually, Sanjaya is seeing this simultaneously with Arjuna. I should mention here, and just remind you, that a lot of this narration is in the past tense, and something that we frequently forget. And the fact is, and what we frequently forget, is that all of this being narrated to the blind king is not taking place in real time. That is, Sanjaya is not narrating it as it takes place, but according to the story of the Mahabharata, it's not until the fifth, you need a tiny bit of the backstory. The blind king Dhritarashtra has a very dim view, negative view, of what is about to take place on the battlefield. In fact, he doesn't want to know. He's afraid. He's afraid to find out what will happen. He's afraid to find out that his sons, his 100 sons, are going to perish on the battlefield. He has a bad feeling about it. So he's been back in the palace. Dhritarashtra has been avoiding this for the first 5 days of the battle. He's been avoiding this. On the 5th day of the battle, Dhritarashtra's curiosity finally gets stirred enough that on the 5th day of the battle, he asks Sanjaya what happened on the battlefield. So this whole narration really takes place not in real time, but after the fact, on the 5th day of the battle. So Sanjaya is narrating what he has already seen. And then, actually, the next verse actually introduces Arjuna. Arjuna is going to speak, so we'll see that. That'll be a nice way to begin the next class. So we'll save that for the next class. What we're seeing here is some of the most powerful, dynamic poetry to be found in the entire Mahabharata. In the 84,000 verses of the Mahabharata. By the way, you remember when I taught the Mahabharata, and I didn't teach, we taught here on our Saturday morning classes, we taught selected passages of the Mahabharata that dealt with more Vedantic topics, not so much with the story of the Mahabharata. In the course of preparing those lectures, I figured out in retrospect, I read 10%, only 10% of the Mahabharata. Some of the 84,000 verses, I probably read about 8,000 verses, this tiny little bit. And which, it was a lot. To read 8,000 verses is a lot. To read 84,000 verses is not going to happen in my lifetime. That's okay. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is I'll tell you right out. In the 8,000 some verses that I read, there's nothing that exceeds the grandeur and the drama of what is being taught here in this 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So it is a dramatic high spot. Remember when you had when you were in high school, remember having a class on literature? Remember on having a teacher tell you something about the dramatic curve, that the drama of a story comes to a peak and then falls off. And this is the dramatic peak, not only of the Bhagavad Gita, this is the dramatic peak of the entire 84,000 verse Mahabharata. And we have much more to see. We'll see in our next class. Couple of quick announcements. Chapter 3 of our, you know that we're publishing the Bhagavad Gita dramatic reenactment videos that I've produced with some of our students here. Chapter 3 was published last week, and Chapter 4, every Wednesday morning, I'm publishing the next chapter. I have to do the final editing, and then the final chapters get posted. You can now see Chapters 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 4 will be posted next Wednesday. It's really, actually, it's another attempt to portray the drama. That's what it is. It's called a dramatic reenactment. So go and watch those videos. You get a sense of the drama of the Bhagavad Gita. It's all available on my YouTube channel. Also, remind you that tomorrow, Sunday, will not be satsang because it's the 5th Sunday. Our satsang will continue on the 1st and 3rd Sunday of each week. So not this Sunday, but the following Sunday we'll have a question and answer session. And we'll conclude now with our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashranvan Utabisira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Duhka Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Mahamritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat Om